The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get stinko.
This is the Giles and the Goalie podcast as part of the Zone Coverage Podcast Network. With your hosts, Giles Farrell and Ben Remington.
Welcome to the Giles and the Goalie podcast. I am your host, Giles Farrell. As always, I'm joined by Ben Remington.
Hello.
I'm sorry if the sound is a little muffled here. I had a cat directly in my face. That's a good start to a podcast, right? At least the cat's not black. And now he's chewing on my face mask. Blazing start. So we're back again this week. Hope everyone enjoyed a happy and safe Memorial Day weekend. Hopefully you did some America things while practicing social distancing. I know I did some grilling, did some drinking of the sorts. So that was fun. What did you do over the weekend?
Yeah, I grilled some fantastic ribeye steaks yesterday, actually. So that was good stuff.
Nice.
Yep. Other than that, I actually did not drink this weekend. I know that's shocking. And I know that some people will be surprised and shocked and alarmed, but yeah, it just don't get around to it a whole lot with a angry, teething baby.
I'm disappointed.
Yeah, I know. I understand, and that's fair.
Oh, come on. He looks so adorable in your profile picture. How can it be so bad?
It's not so bad. It's just that, like, all attention has to go towards him until 8 o'clock at night every night. And by then, like, my wife just goes to bed, and I could drink, but as you well know, I'm not much of a drinker anyway, and I only really socially drank before this.
Right.
So just like having one drink by myself at 8 p.m. is like, okay, now what? So yeah, that's just kind of where I'm at. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm trying to cut down. I'm trying to get some exercise in and kind of watch all that stuff. Especially now with bars and restaurants starting to slowly open their way back up. I need to not overindulge on all of things. So I need something to offset what's about to happen. So trying to, that's the key word, trying.
We're all trying. I mean, really.
Yeah. Speaking of trying, dynamite segue, the NHL is trying to make their way back into active play. They took a small step towards resuming their 2019-2020 season at a date still unknown. But in the last week, the NHL and the NHL Players Association have agreed upon a 24-team playoff format should they come back in play the remainder of this season. And it's crucial to remind everyone who is excited about hockey coming back that there are no guarantees to this. This is merely them saying this is the format we're going to play when we come back. But a lot of other things still have to be figured out. And if you're kind of wondering what those things are, Michael Russo of The Athletic had a piece with Devin Dubnyk, the Wild's NHLPA team representative, and where he, kind of asked the questions that still need to be sorted out. And it's a good look at still all the issues between the league and the Players Association as to what has to get figured out. And as we heard from the commissioner, Gary Bettman, today, it sounds like these things have to be figured out within the next month if they want to put hockey back on for the remainder of this season. if they want to salvage it in the way that they have now agreed upon. And I saw you were a little fired up about this, so I will just go ahead and give you the floor.
We didn't have to. I mean, I'm not so fired up that I'm like calling for people's heads. It just, we knew this was coming, but just kind of seeing it laid out in front of us, it looks even dumber than what we thought when we knew it was coming. You know what I mean? Like, they're just so desperate to get the playoffs in to look like the Stanley Cup playoffs. And the 24 team structure doesn't bother me as much. It's really kind of gimmicky, but I get it. Like, I get why they did it, and that they tried to make as many fan bases / teams / players as happy as possible. I get that. The part that actually really bothers me the most is how long this is going to take and how it's going to affect next season, because they're still very, very, very committed to playing a full season next season, but it might not start until January, Bettman says, which under this current plan, this season wouldn't get over until sometime in mid-September at the earliest. So they could be playing well into October, if not later. And so it just really kind of F's up next season. So that was mostly my beef with it. It's just like, you've already mangled one season, and obviously a pandemic's going to do that, and we understand. But, next season, why are you trying to stuff 82 games in starting in January next year? Are they going to play 5 days a week? Are they going to play into August next year? Because that seems like you're just forever putting off the following season. So it's just weird to me, and I just think that, they didn't do a great job of setting themselves up for the future. But who knows? Maybe this is all a moot point. Maybe this goes a hell of a lot better than I thought. Maybe we just see a super condensed Stanley Cup playoffs with way less off days. Obviously, we don't have the schedule for that in any semblance yet. So maybe I'll be proven gloriously wrong on this, and the NHL will do the right thing, and the NHL will have a brilliant plan. But I don't have a lot of faith in that.
I'm going to play the devil's advocate here.
Sure.
I look at this from a league standpoint, and obviously it's worth to put this at the front of my argument, is that the league is obviously first and foremost trying to make sure that it is safe for them to come back and have the correct protocols in place for them to come back, should they come back. And from the NHL's perspective, right now, I kind of wonder, is this getting pressured from somewhere else? Like, is somebody else, maybe like TV rights holders, maybe driving the boat on needling them to come back in some way? Because you look at it right now, no other league is really close of the 4 major sports in North America to coming back. The MLB is just, we can go on for an hour about how disastrous that is right now. The NBA is kind of eyeing some potential sites, but there's nothing firm. There's not even a format that they've agreed upon to come back with. And then, the NFL is just in its off season, so it's not really affecting them.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, the NHL could be, say they can get going in July sometime. They would be the first league to do so out of the 4 major leagues. And that's a lot of eyes on the league when there's really no other major sports going on. And yeah, it's in July, it's summer, blah, blah, blah. But, if the NHL can pull it off, they can perhaps grow their way in a, purely a circumstantial event, but it would be good for them. And it would be good for their TV rights holders in terms of ratings.
Mm.
So I wonder if maybe that's why there's a little bit more pressure to get all this going right now. But if you can do it safely and all that, then yeah, let's have at it.
I'm sure, I'm positive there's pressure from the rights holders to the NHL. but I don't know that it's so much pressure that the NHL rushed this forward. I just think the NHL is that dumb, like, for lack of a better term. That, and, baseball has a plan together. They want to start the season around the 4th of July, and they've come out and said as much. They want to start spring training around June 10th, I think. So that's what they're working towards, albeit not very quickly. So I think the NHL throwing this out there, that even with this plan, they're still not going to be the first sport back on. Baseball is, if baseball gets their act together.
Disagree.
Well, I mean, we'll see. We don't know. But with the plan right now, let's say baseball somehow throws a Hail Mary and gets things done in the next 2 weeks, which is possible to get it done in the next 2 weeks. They start June 10th, spring training, and their season starts July 3rd. Well, the NHL's phases that they go through, training camps can't even open until July 1st. And so you're not playing games. You're not playing this qualifying series and these round-robin series until, July 10th or 14th at the earliest? So, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. It was, there's still a lot to hammer out, obviously, but I think the NHL and the NHLPA are both motivated. It's like every sport. The players want to play, and the league obviously wants to operate because there's a lot of money to be made on the TV revenue side. So I think that there's, for every sport, I think there's an abundance of reason to get things done. And is there a lot of petty crap in the way? Of course there is, because sports these days are extremely complicated, and that's going to happen when you've got bazillion-dollar contracts. That's just going to happen. So, but I think they ultimately get it done. And I don't know. I think hockey is just a weird. They just made things more convoluted than they need to. And you look no further than the draft setup. We haven't hit on that yet, but they're doing 2 phases of the lottery and having placeholder teams for the first phase. And if one of those teams gets into the top 3, then they'll essentially re-lottery the picks that weren't taken of the top 3 in a second phase. And it's just like, I mean, that plan makes sense, and I get why they would do it, but it's so unnecessary. It's just one of those convoluted things where it's just like, why did you make it that complex?
Yeah, the draft lottery was a little too much for me. I'm still trying to figure it out. Not even the best scientists or mathematicians in the world could translate what Gary Bettman was saying when he held his media call today. Yeah, that draft lottery was something that the NHL did not need to go to that extent of crazy with.
Right.
So I'll give you that one, but I'll still make the argument for coming back to play. But we can do that pretty much any time from here on out. So we are going to look a little bit more into this NHL playoff format that's now been agreed upon. So you take out the top 4 teams in each conference, and they play a round-robin tournament to determine the seedings in each conference for 1 through 4. And then you have the 8 remaining teams in terms of points percentage in each conference play each other. So, you got 5 versus 12, 6 versus 11, 7, 10, 8, 9. And the Minnesota Wild would be 10th seed in that scenario with a matchup against the 7th seeded Vancouver Canucks in what's considered the play-in round of the NHL playoffs. And that, I believe I saw, was going to be a 5-game play-in series.
Yes.
So we can start to, at least while we can, look at a potential Wild Canucks series and a best-of-5 and what jumps off the page at you.
Well, actually, one of the interesting things, I switched on NHL Network today, and they had EJ Hradek on, and he was talking about that being a very interesting series to watch. But he said it'll be interesting to see if Devin Dubnyk can return to form for the series. And I'm like, there's no way Devin Dubnyk is starting the series, right? Like they almost have to start with Al Stalock the way that he was playing down the stretch. So I guess that maybe adds an interesting element right off the bat. Who is the Wild goalie? I have to think it's Stalock, but there's also a somewhat worthwhile argument to be made that Devin Dubnyk might be starting game one. So that's one thing that's I guess minorly intriguing. Obviously, you've got Elias Pettersson, you've got Brock Besser. Those will be interesting stars to see. And then obviously on the Wild side, you've got Kevin Fiala. And it might come down to a matchup of who has the hottest shooter. And does Kevin Fiala keep up his hot streak that he left off the season with? Or does Pettersson, who's fantastic, does he kind of start off hot and carry that team? So that's kind of my insight to it. I think the goaltending situation is interesting, and Markstrom over in Vancouver is, you don't know what you're going to get out of him either, because he can be inconsistent. But I think it kind of comes down to, Fiala versus Pettersson almost. Is that something that you thought of right off the bat?
I mean, it's there. But I mean, you hit it on the head. The first thing that really comes into play, or at least first in my head, was, okay, Wild goaltending is basically going to decide if they're going to be in this series or it's going to be a quick one.
Right.
Devin Dubnyk was not good for the parts of the season that he played in. And then Alex Stalock was, just kind of basically treading water until the last month before the pause, in which he really kind of got it together. I would probably put that more as just a hot streak, considering his body of work.
Mm-hmm.
And so you really have to almost flip a coin when it comes to starting goaltender for game one. But, unless something catastrophic happens, I would be willing to bet Dean Evison goes with the guy who's, kept the Wild relevant this year, Alex Stalock.
Right. Yeah, I think that's – I don't know. I just don't see how that doesn't happen. I certainly understand if you want to make an argument for Dubnyk being, quote-unquote, the starting goalie of this team. But I just – as much as he struggled this season, and even going back to most of last season, I just don't see it. Like, it just doesn't seem like that's going to be an option for them. But I don't know. Should be an interesting series, though. I think the Canucks are an interesting up-and-coming team. Certainly lots of young talent on that team. So, and they're probably not super thrilled about being subjected to this, because they were in a playoff spot, and I think the teams that were 5 through 8 in both conferences,
they're probably not too thrilled.
Probably not too thrilled about this. But I think honestly, it should be a good series. I mean, assuming both teams show up to play the way that they can play, I think this is a pretty close series. Minnesota actually won this series on the season 2-1. So even though Vancouver's the higher seed, the Wild actually fared better over the season than against the Canucks. So I think this has the potential to be a pretty good series, and I really do like that as a 5-game series. They also talked about doing 5-game series for the first and second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs as the things normalize a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's just fine. I mean, 5-game series can still be great. We see it in baseball all the time. It really, it really can still work out just fine. And I really do like they went to that, because I think getting this playoffs in a timely fashion is kind of one of the bigger concerns that I have.
I miss also on that 5-game series. I miss when the NBA first round was 5 games.
Yeah,
especially
it was.
Especially more so now with the gap in talent of teams between
yes.
the top 4 and the bottom 4 in each postseason.
Oh my God, I know.
But I have more fond memories of the NBA 5-game series from like the 90s, when it was just cutthroat basketball. No matter who you're playing, it's going to go 4 or 5 games. But yeah, 5-game series should be fun. Again, if that happens, it certainly would maybe put a little more pep in the step in games 1 and 2. Maybe a little more so than what you would normally see.
Right, and that might be the downside of the 7-game series is that games 1 through 3, I don't want to say they're meaningless. They're not, but sometimes there's not a lot of intensity to them, and there's not a lot of urgency to them. And with a 5-game series, I mean, it is like you said, it is cutthroat from game 1, and so that should make these series really fun. And I really do hope they continue that through rounds 1 and 2. Obviously, they're not going to do anything like this long term. So this is kind of the one shot we have at 5-game series anywhere in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I kind of want to see it. I'm kind of excited to see it, and they're going to need it, quite frankly, to compete. Let's just say hypothetically, baseball is back. Let's say hypothetically the NBA comes back, and then if you start going into September, you bet you're behind. The NFL is going to be back. And so obviously the NHL isn't dumb enough to play games on Sunday afternoons, but they've also got college football will be back then, potentially. That's even more up in the air than anything. But they're going to need to differentiate themselves. They're going to need a way to make their product exciting. And if they're not going to allow, Kirill Kaprizov to make things exciting, they might as well make things exciting with 5-game series.
Right. Yeah, I just don't know too much about Vancouver right now. Obviously, there's been some stuff at zonecoverage.com about the Canucks very briefly from Drew Cove. So you should check that out if you want to start to dig into that a little bit. But I don't know. I feel like, and not to be too cliche, but it's going to come down to goaltending.
Yeah, well, it always does. This is the playoffs.
And I also feel an underlying thing is, can the Wild do enough with the Canucks defense? Can they pressure them enough into making mistakes? Because the Wild are going to be very sound on the back end. So at that will be also something to keep an eye on. But again, it just translates right into goaltending because the Wild do an amazing job at suppressing shots in front of the net. So, yeah, that's the early word on Canucks Wild series. So I don't have anything more. And it's also worth pointing out that these playoff games will be played in 2 different hub cities, quote unquote. There will be a Western Conference hub city and a Eastern Conference hub city. The Twin Cities are one of the 10 finalists to be a hub city, but insiders reporting late after the Gary Bettman presser today that Las Vegas certainly has already stuck out as a leading candidate to be one of the hub cities. Yay for us, even though we can't really do anything about it.
Right.
Like, go there.
Right.
But I personally don't see the Twin Cities being a hub. I have to feel like, say Vegas is the Western Conference hub city, and it's been pointed out that, the 2 hub cities can be, 2 Western Conference cities. So you could have, for instance, you could have the West in Las Vegas and the East in Chicago, for instance. That could be a thing. But I feel like the NHL obviously will want to go to Vegas, and they'll want to put Toronto, one of the other finalists, as the East City. And basically, from what I saw, it sounds like if the Canadian 14-day isolation rule comes down, then it seems like that will be something the NHL goes ahead with. But if not, then the NHL will keep it within the United States, but they obviously would like to for cost because it would be a little bit cheaper to have a hub city up there in Canada. So
Yeah. Yeah, I'd seen before this announcement that they wanted a team in Canada, or they wanted a hub in Canada rather. The only thing that's really going to get in the way is Canada has been a little bit more stringent on their policies regarding COVID-19. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see if that shakes out. If Canada doesn't relent, which is entirely possible because it's kind of been this weird juxtaposition where, the more liberal the area is, the more conservative they are about their, restrictions. Canada very well could slam the door in the NHL's face and say, sorry, you're not playing here. And that's the situation where if Canada does indeed slam the door in NHL's face, I think that's where the Twin Cities comes up, because I think Vegas is all but locked in, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a guarantee that's going to be one of the hubs, and it makes a ton of sense. They've got a ton of lodging literally across the street from the arena, and it's certainly a place that the NHL wants to be. So it'll be true to see what shakes out for that second hub, and it'll be even more interesting if Minneapolis St. Paul is a hub, but it hosts all of the East teams. So the Wild aren't even here, which would be really funny.
Yeah, there's also two other Canadian cities, Edmonton and Vancouver, joining Toronto on the finalist list. Then also there's, like I said, Chicago. There's Columbus, Dallas, Los Angeles, and Pittsburgh, rounding out the 10 finalists for the hub cities. Do you have any dark horse cities?
Well, yeah, I think any city besides Toronto and Vegas are dark horse cities at this point. I think that good as we've I think that as good as we've done with our COVID rates here in the state of Minnesota, I think that we are a very legitimate candidate. I think that given the amount of rinks that we have available too, can only be a plus. I mean, rinks that we have and very close, and we've got pretty good world-class arenas, a couple, and so that helps a lot too. I don't know. I think it'd be interesting to have it all out west, to have like Vancouver and Vegas host, but that it's not like they're worried about start times or anything like that. It wouldn't play out the way that people would fear, with West Coast starting times or whatever, because they can start whenever they want, because there's going to be any fans there. So that just kind of makes the whole where it's at thing kind of irrelevant, unfortunately. I'd like it to be fun and exciting which hub they're in, but I think with an empty stadium, it could be anywhere, and I don't know that it's going to make that big of a difference to anybody.
Just as I'm going to actually answer that question, but I think Columbus is kind of a dark horse here. The state of Ohio is pretty much opening up. I think today they had like gyms and fitness centers and pools and whatnot open up, and so I think that brings them to kind of most things opening up to like 50% capacity, and they have the rinks and lodging and whatnot, so that kind of makes them a dark horse for me. I don't know why, just kind of a gut feeling.
You just want to see the cannon?
I didn't think of that, but that would be terrible.
Does that take you off? Does that take them off your list?
I don't know why. Columbus just strikes me as the ultimate dark horse here. So we'll see what happens. It really is,
because it's probably the smallest of all those markets.
Right. But yeah, we'll obviously be continuing to follow. And like I said, Gary Bettman was on, I think it was a Canadian radio station, and he said, ultimately a decision has to be made within 3 to 4 weeks. From the May 26th announcement that he did. So really we're looking at within a month here. They've got a lot to figure out for hub cities, the sanitation protocols, keeping the players healthy, and then all that fun stuff. So if they can get the rest of that figured out, the hockey is going to be the easy part. But
right, no kidding.
It's just all the COVID prevention and isolation and stuff. And I actually found it really fascinating in that article I referenced earlier with Devin Dubnyk. One of the questions or scenarios that he asked was, okay, so say a player has to leave isolation and return home for a family emergency. Does that mean that that player is done? Are they allowed to come back? Like what's going to be the protocol there? And that question, more so applies to him, among
Right.
anyone,
Yeah.
given his season. But yeah, that's just kind of the what ifs that really have to be figured out. So
Yeah, there's a lot of what ifs, and certainly a positive test by a player is probably the biggest one. And there's probably a million different ways to answer that question, but I think that's ultimately the protocol they have in place for a positive test from a player on a team is going to be probably what makes or breaks this whole thing, right? Like that's the same thing for all the other sports that are negotiating this as well. Like what happens when a player tests positive?
right.
How a league determines to handle that and the player's comfort level with that is ultimately going to be what makes or breaks everything. But and like I said before, I think they'll figure it out. Players want to play, and I don't blame them. I was a sorry excuse for an athlete in my youth. I wanted to play. I mean, you start playing the games because you want to play. You want to compete. I mean, we just watched The Last Dance. Could you imagine right now telling Michael Jordan he couldn't play basketball? And in his prime and the way that he acted, look back when he had that foot injury. Not to make this a Last Dance podcast, but we could also do that too. But the players want to play is my point. And certainly there's risks there, and certainly those risks need to be mitigated or accounted for or whatever. But the players want to play, and so I think they'll figure it out. And I have maybe I'm just for the first time in my life, maybe I'm too optimistic.
Yeah, and it sounds like when there is a more formatted plan for hub cities and isolation and all that, it sounds like it'll more come to a full-on players vote. It won't just be the team representatives voting.
Oh, really?
Like
That's
there was. So yeah, like that was another fascinating thing I saw in the piece with Dubnyk. So that honestly, go read that, because that's the most. That's honestly been the most insightful thing in all of this that I've read. So it just really did open the door to everything that you need to know what needs to get figured out. So we can scoot along here. And in other news, Wild news, last week the Iowa Wild had 4 players named to the AHL All-Star teams. They had 3 on the first All-Star team. Forward Sam Annis, who led the league in points with 70. Defenseman Brennan Manel, who led the AHL defenseman in assists with, I believe it was 42. And then Capo Kakkonen, who led the league in wins and shutouts and was named on Tuesday today as their goaltender of the season. And I'll have a piece on him at Zone Coverage on Wednesday. So probably when you're listening to this, go check that out with a little insight into how he improved from his first year to his second year, really what kind of helped him get better. And obviously a little insight to his call-up in Minnesota, to what he's doing right now just to stay in shape. So give that a check. And then obviously Jerry Mayhew, who led the AHL in goals, was named to the second AHL All-Star team. So congrats, a tip of the cap to them. And I did also write a story of the Iowa Wild season on Zone Coverage on Monday. Kind of an insight to a team that really had good chemistry and was just fun from top to bottom. And their season was unfortunately cut down short. So, give that a look. And just a noteworthy thing, since we're short on things to talk about. And the goal out of all of this is, well, I shouldn't say all of this, but something that I do hope for is with the expanded rosters potentially for the NHL when they eventually, if they come back, they could very well give Sam Anis his call up.
Yeah.
It's funny.
That would be nice.
I asked him about it on the media call on Friday. I asked him, like, what would that mean to him personally? And he said one sentence on it, and he started talking about Jerry Mayhew's call-up to show you just what kind of a guy he is and why he's so likable. Like, and then it just led into all the guys telling the story of how they were all at a team event at the Wells Fargo Arena, and they were watching Jerry Mayhew score his first NHL goal. So
nice.
Something you can find in that story too.
Cool.
So yeah, fun little anecdote. All right, we can mosey into our mailbag. We did open up the Giles and the Goalie mailbag. We did get questions, so
cool.
That's exciting. Also, remembering to check the Facebook page, which I forget all the time. So we did get, I don't think we had any Facebook questions, but we did get Twitter questions. So we will dive in if my computer wants to cooperate. Alec asks, will the Winter Classic be a home opener next season? That's a good question. That was the one of the underlying things when you saw the NHL might not start till January next year is the Wild are going to be impacted in their host of the Winter Classic. Mm-hmm. And I saw Gary Bettman could say today they could possibly put that on the beginning of the season, come out with a bang, but I have a tough time believing that they're gonna put a Winter Classic on, when there's still so much unknown about fans being in the stands yet. I feel I'm a little bit skeptical on that right now. It might be a safer bet for them to just push it to the next season, but we'll see.
So I believe when they canceled the season way back or when they shortened the season, was it 2012? They had to cancel the Winter Classic a couple of months ahead of time, just due to the venue and all the costs and preparation associated with it. But that didn't happen until I want to say like mid-October. Yeah. Like they were already to the point where they should have been playing games, and they decided to cancel the Winter Classic. I believe it was at Michigan that season at the Big House.
Yeah, you might have been right.
So I think that, it's possible it gets canceled, but I think if they play a season with fans and it doesn't start until January, which I'm just irate about, but whatever, if that's the situation, I think they could start this season with a Winter Classic. I don't see why not. If it's determined that it's safe for fans and all, if we're over this, if there's a vaccine, which I think is basically everybody is pushing all of their 110% of their chips into that pile. If there's a vaccine, which is, very doubtful. I mean, or not doubtful, but it's kind of up in the air at this point whether one would get, made in time and actually approved and all that jazz. I think it's possible. But I guess the good thing is that it wouldn't be canceled until much closer to it. They wouldn't have to cancel it until, like I said, I think it was mid-October, if I remember right. Maybe it was early October, but we would at least have a 2 to 3 month, a cushion where, they're not going to cancel. What I'm saying is they're not going to cancel it next week.
Right.
I don't want Wild fans to freak out and think, oh my God, they're going to cancel the Winter Classic. No, they're not going to even consider doing anything with moving anything until, we have some idea as to what's going on. So I wouldn't worry about that too much until, at least until we have an idea of what this year's playoffs are going to look like timing wise.
I thought the hinting that the NHL cannot start until January was just it affects Minnesota in the most way because first there's the Winter Classic, which could easily be pushed back by that to the next season. And then it's going to more than likely put Kirill Kaprizov back into the KHL for that season.
Now,
because unless the NHL allows him to play in the playoff, like you got to think this guy isn't going to want to sit around from March until January without playing in, real game.
mhm. Now I could be totally wrong on this. Was this actually this wasn't actually reported, was it, that he could go back to the KHL if they don't have a season until January, or is this speculation from you or Russo or
just speculation?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's entirely possible. Yeah. But yeah, that's scary because you don't want to lose yet another year of Kaprizov when we've waited this long. That would be the most Minnesota sports thing ever, wouldn't it?
I also just like to, just say something, negative about the situation with Kaprizov and just watch everyone go nuts. So I'm a little bit of a troll in that regard. So I
you're
apologize.
preparing yourself for the worst, and that's what a Minnesota sports fan should do because we're all dead inside.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Moving on. Next question from Eric Vigo. He asks, do we know if Kakinen will be ready to play in July? That's his first question. The answer is yes, he is working out in Finland. He actually took that media call at 1 a.m. Finland time
Jesus.
with us. So they, obviously the time difference. But yeah, he's working out at home, just keeping up with his workouts because Finland's a lot like Minnesota right now. Not a lot is open. So, he has to do pretty much everything from his own home. So he's
it was a wrist injury, correct?
Oh yeah, that's right. He's I think he should be good to go because he did go on to talk about being called up by the Wild should the NHL return to play.
Yeah, that was another question that I would have is, I mean, what do you do about replacing players that get injured? Because that's bound to happen. I'm sure they're going to expand rosters a little bit. So
I completely forgot about his wrist injury. That just totally skipped my mind. But yeah, he didn't even mention it, so I would assume,
yeah, if he's preparing, then he
all
must
things
be good
are go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I might actually inquire about that. The next one was, what do you think about having matinee prospects games in NHL cities during 2020, 2021, since AHL might not be able to run their season? NHL teams probably need to have AHL rosters close by to get through the year. I like that idea.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept, and the NHL, if they have a very late start to the season, that's going to mess up all sorts of stuff. That's going to mess up minor league hockey. Not that there's AHL and ECHL, and that's about it affiliated, but it's going to make things a little hairy, obviously. So, and the AHL, it's not like their players didn't have an off season. They were they canceled pretty quickly, so their players have just been sitting around.
Yeah, no, I like that idea. So if it's a good idea, then no, the NHL will not do it.
Always remember that.
Minnesota Wild affiliates and prospects asks, how much of a second off season does the league really need if this plan, the return to play format, works out? I think I saw something along the lines of they would need like a 45-day off season, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm.
And that, honestly, the NHL off season, it's technically 3 months or so, but they compress everything within a 3-week time frame. So they don't need that much time.
Right. And that's kind of one of my bigger beefs with the way things are shaking out. Like I'm relatively confident they can get things squared away and start playing in mid-July. And so then the whole pushing the season back to start a full 82 game season in January next year is just madness to me. Cause then you're talking about 3 months off, which I know this is all hypothetical stuff, but it seems weird to me that they would be okay with not playing for so much of this calendar year, even with the pandemic. I mean, cause you basically have an off season going right now. They've been shut down for over 2 months, and it's going to be at least another month plus, probably closer to 2 months So that's a lot of downtime. And you've got these teams that aren't coming back. 7 teams aren't coming back. 8 teams that are going to be eliminated within 5 games, sometimes less. So you've got like half your league that's going to be sitting around having played 3 to 5 games at most in a 9-month span. It seems very weird to me, and the whole timing of it. And obviously a lot remains to be seen, though.
Right. And another one was asked, how do they deal with a pending free agent getting injured late in the playoffs and getting a worse contract for next year because of the shortened offseason? I mean, I don't think they do. That's kind of the risk you take with getting back out on the ice as an NHL player. Is, terrible as it sounds.
I don't know that. I mean, it depends on the level of free agent, right? Like,
right.
But that goes with every season. Like, if you've got a guy, if you've got a really good player and they get hurt and they're going to be out to start the season, well, teams are still going to want to sign him long term. So it might depress his value a little bit, but I don't think it's going to change much. And if you've got a very fringy NHLer that gets hurt, well, what are the odds he would have gotten signed anyway? So I don't think it changes much.
Thoughts on the Vegas AHL team likely being called the Henderson Silver Knights?
I don't like it. I came out and I wrote an article about how the Iowa Wild shouldn't be called the Wild. And I just think that in this day and age with sports and marketing where it's at, naming minor league teams after your major league teams is just kind of it's a very old school practice, and I just don't like it. I'm a marketing guy. I have a marketing degree. I don't like it. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense for that team as a separate entity. Even if you are very close, like Henderson, obviously it's gonna be right outside of Las Vegas. Iowa Wild, not that far from Minnesota, but it's not, Iowa Wild aren't that close. So I don't know. I don't like it, but I'd like to see a little more creativity, but that's just the marketing snob in me.
Yeah. And then last question from Minnesota Wild affiliates and prospects. Why is the NHL wanting the lottery before games start? Could it put teams in a position to try and lose?
Well, no, because the way they're doing it, until I'll explain the lottery, I think I have a good way of explaining it for Wild fans. So let's just say
good luck.
They're gonna do phase 1. The 7 teams that aren't in the 2014 playoff are locked into their positions. Then they're going to have 8 teams that are placeholders. They're fake teams. They're not tied to any actual NHL team. Those are also going to be in that phase 1 lottery. And then they're going to pick the top 3 teams, the top 3 picks. If anybody from the fake teams is in that top 3 picks, that pick basically goes into a second lottery, which they're not going to do until after the qualifying round is over. So if the Wild lose in the first round, this play-in thing, and one of those placeholder teams got either the first, second, or third overall pick in the phase 1 lottery, the Wild could potentially get one of those top 3 picks because they're essentially going to redraw for one of those picks if it wasn't taken in the first phase. I don't know. It's a little, like I said, it's convoluted. It makes sense to me why they did it like this, but I don't understand why they needed to do the phase 1 lottery before games were played. That's to me where the unnecessary convoluted part is.
Right.
I don't know. It just would have been easier to me. Like at this point, just do the top 7. They're the only teams that have a shot. Like why are teams 8 through 15 even going to be in the lottery this year? I mean, this is one year where you had a pass to make changes like that. And, I don't think anybody would have really complained all that much. Like those teams had a shot at the playoffs. So there you go. But I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
Yeah. All right. Next question from Please Just Sign Kaprizov Already. What do you guys think the Winter Classic should be? North Stars throwback to the original jerseys, referencing the Wild original jerseys from 2000. Other throwback or completely original?
I think you almost have to be completely original, don't you? I I like what they did with the Stadium Series, and that was a new look that we had never seen before. That was not based on the North Stars, not based on the original Wild jerseys. I think there's plenty of room to make a new jersey, and it can look old school. It can look kind of like a retro design.
Mhm.
I think there's tons of room to do something like that, and I think that's not only that's the direction they should go. I think that's the direction they will go.
Yeah, I agree. I'd go with something more completely original, and I'm just very much uh, a big proponent of using the alternate M logo on the shoulders of the current home jersey as the crest of that jersey. I will say one thing, as I just see an ad for the last Winter Classic between Dallas and Nashville. Please God, don't make the wheat color the breezers. I just cannot.
You know what? I hate to say it, but they're going to come out with a jersey. It's going to be green. It's going to have the M on it, and it's going to look good. And then they are going to match it with the damn wheat breezers. I foresee it.
I got a feeling.
Yep.
Yep. Last question from Glenn Ojanen. I hope I'm saying that right. If there is a free agent opportunity, is there anyone you'd sign for 2021? We did kind of get into that a little bit last week when we built a 2020-21 roster. But, we both kind of agreed that the free agent market is not overly great.
No.
If you're, looking to shop with a bunch of cap space, I would definitely pick up the phone on a goaltender like you mentioned, Robin Lehner, just to see if you can grab him, and then if not, you've got Capo Kakinen waiting in the wings. But there's not a whole lot of space for a free agent on the Wild roster, outside of maybe going out and getting a center.
Which the market is terrible for.
Right. Centers are finding a good center in the free agent market. Just, that doesn't come easy. But, if you're just kind of looking for depth, there's certainly some decent centers to be had. You mentioned one that was close to my heart last week. But if I'm trying to be a little bit more objective, of course it lists not how I wanted it to.
Oh yeah,
It's not good, to be honest. So
no, it's really not. And honestly, I signed Halla because the Wild are thin at center, and you're not going to find that 1C that first line center in free agency. You just aren't. So why not take a swing at a guy who's, let's be honest, going to be cheap, because he's been hurt a ton in the last 2 seasons and hasn't been productive. I mean, he really hasn't been productive since his first year in Vegas. We had a really good year. It was 30 goals, 33, something like that. He was a really good year in Vegas, and then very forgettable since then. So, I did that because I think he would be a very cheap option. You could get him for low term, low dollars, relatively speaking. But there's just not much out there. And so low risk is the way you want to go if you're going to sign any centers out of free agency, because there's just not a lot of quality out there. So another reason why I had Sam Ennis up on my squad, because I think that I'd like to see him get a shot. And I agree with Giles in that it probably won't be with the Wild, but as long as I was given control for a day, I made that shot with the Wild. So.
Right. And other low cost centers, if you're looking to go that route, like Tyler Ennis, old friend, Carl Soderberg, Derek Brassard. It's not a great list. So
no, really not.
We'll just leave it at that. So
yeah, that's bad when you sort by centers on Cap Friendly, and you sort by points. So you've got centers sorted by points. The top free agent is Tyler Ennis. Tyler freaking Ennis.
Yeah. Remember when I wanted to keep him that 1 year instead of buying him out, and then he actually was kind of productive that next year? Yeah.
Oy.
That can do it for us. That was a mailbag, and that we can call it a show. So you can follow Ben and I on Twitter at Ben Remington, at Giles Farrell, our podcast, Twitter at GATG Wild Podcast. You can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, anywhere you get your podcasts. You can find us there. If you do listen to us on iTunes, please subscribe, drop us a rating. Helps us out a lot. You can also find my written work at Zone Coverage. Go to zonecoverage.com/wild. You can find fresh content every day, Monday through Friday. Even in this pause, we are spitting out daily content for you, and it's actually good. We're not aiming for the clickbaity stuff. So, that will wrap it up for us this week, and we will chat at you again next week.
Later.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Gill and the Goaltender podcast.
That's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.